The European Citizens' Initiative is the first transnational tool of participative democracy. It allows citizens to participate directly in the development of EU policies. But the system needs reform. Until now, it hasn't been a great success, as too many such initiatives have fallen by the wayside, says Hungarian MEP György Schöpflin. He's the man responsible for the implementation of the regulation of the European Citizens' Initiative at the Parliament. Mr. Schöpflin, we received quite a lot of questions concerning the Citizens' Initiative, so success, a failure.
Dear Mr. Schöpflin, on behalf of the ECI campaign, I would like to ask you two questions. First of all, many in civil society believe that the ECI was designed to fail. How do you propose to restore their trust in the ECI and convince them it is worth using? Second of all, what will you do to ensure that the registration procedure and the data requirements are more citizens-friendly? Thank you very much.
Failure, yes or no? Conspiracy, yes or no?
No conspiracy. Failure, it goes a little too far. You might say, what are the failure criteria? But it's not been a success. If we were to say it's a failure, then we might as well throw the whole thing in the bin. And I'm saying no, it's not been a great success, but I think it can be made much more effective than it is at the moment. Now, the registration issue, which has come up also in Mr. Kukowski's question, yes, I think there are serious problems. For a start, there are 28 member states, and each of them has a somewhat different procedure for registering names. So that has to be homogenized is the wrong word, but I think it has to be unified. And my thought is it can't be done overnight, is to have a European digital citizenship. Based, if you like, on the Estonian e-citizenship. Anybody can register as an Estonian citizen, an e-citizen.
So let's go to the right, to water. People were demonstrating in front of the European Parliament, and just ask you to bring you this comment and question.
Million people around Europe have asked the European Commission to recognize water as a access to water as a human right, so it would have been important to have a proper reaction and not just a sort of so-called positive reaction, meaning, okay, all right, we know it's important, we want something more, we want some action that makes it real for citizens around Europe.
So it's not only about saying, well, nice to hear that, in fact you're right, just water for everybody is important. We would like to have something more.
I mean, all I can say is I agree. This is Elisabetta Cangelosi, I think she's quite right. Now, I don't really know the inside story, but it's quite clear to me that the Commission has been, shall we say, rather dilatory, not to say tardy, in doing something about this. And I entirely agree that given that it's gone through all the stages, it should be brought into law. Now, as to whether or not the right to water is a human right, well, we can leave that to the philosophers. It is a right, and above all, because it's gone through the stages, millions of signatures, recognised by the Commission, action should follow.
Now, a very concrete question.
My name is Pablo Sanchez, and I am one of the coordinators of the European Citizens' Initiative Right to Water, and I would like to know how citizens have to organize to ensure that the voice is heard and the demands are taken legally into account in a binding way by the European institutions.
This is a very fair question. As far as the organisation is concerned, now here I think if you look at the framework, a lot of leeway is given to citizens. After all, it's supposed to be a mobilising instrument to bring citizens into contact with one another from as many countries as possible, minimum 7, as I'm sure all those people know. And therefore, the Commission or Parliament or any of the EU institutions are not going to say, this is the way you must do it. What is a reality is the money. It's clearly much more expensive, I think, than anybody understood at the outset. How do you organise 1 million people? It's a lot of people. It is disappointing, and I do share their concern, because I think this is a useful instrument for transmitting ideas from below, and to some degree disturbing the bureaucratic order of life in the Commission and perhaps even in Parliament to some degree. But there are genuine problems, and it's getting these two into some kind of balance that's the difficulty.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
What are the measures that the European Parliament envisages to put forward in view of the upcoming revision of the regulation for the European Citizens' Initiative, provided that 40% of the initiative have been rejected registration so far? Are there any chances for increase of this success rate?
I sincerely hope that the success rate will increase. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. As I said, at the end of the year, there will be a review by the Commission, which I think is the next big moment. What Parliament is envisaging, which is basically up to me and my colleagues, depending on whatever amendments they put in, various new devices, one of which, for example, is a dedicated office in each member state, who can then give advice. They can't actually draft it, but they can give advice on how to go forward. We've got to solve the problem of the servers, we've got to solve the problem of the citizenship and the registers, etc., etc. So I think that we are aware, we are working on the revision of the regulation, and I do entirely agree that the 40% rejected looks very bad as a headline figure, but bear in mind that some of those were perfectly properly rejected, like the ones that were not EU competence.
György Schöpflin, thanks a lot for this interview.